Hi, my name is Erin Durham, and I'll be presenting on Beyond Zoom Zombies, Centering Critical Pedagogy in the Virtual Classroom. So as a reference and instruction librarian at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, I've been teaching online for the past year, and much of that is in synchronous one-shot sessions. You can see some of those courses from this past spring there on the screen. So a lot of my big question has been how to engage critical pedagogy in the virtual classroom. And what I'm going to share today, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about critical pedagogy. And pioneers in critical pedagogy include Paulo Freire and bell hooks. They really looked at education as an act of liberation, ways to break down systemic inequities, to center students, to dismantle hierarchies in the classroom space. I love how bell hooks put this, quote, "As a classroom community, our capacity to generate excitement is deeply affected by our interest in one another, in hearing one another's voices, in recognizing one another's presence," close quote. But how can we do this in a virtual space, especially as virtual learning can feel very isolating? So I'm going to share three principles of critical pedagogy, and then with each of those, an example from my teaching this past spring. So number one, critical pedagogy advances a collaborative learning community. And in face-to-face sessions, I would often do small group work or have students post or write on whiteboards. And so I have found using virtual whiteboards has been really helpful in building a sense of rapport and engaging students. So some of those include Padlet, Jamboard, Mural. There's other platforms available. I'm going to share a screenshot. This was from a language class I taught this spring. And at the beginning of the session, just asking students, what aspect of research papers do you enjoy and what do you find challenging? You can see these are the student responses, which was a really great way to have some energy at the beginning of a session. Number two, critical pedagogy centers personal experience, emotion, and reflection. And this can be tricky because virtual learning virtual learning in many ways is disembodied. We're not physically present. So one question that I asked to center feelings, kind of the affective dimension of learning, is how are you feeling about your research assignment? This was the question that was at the beginning, and then we launched into searching for sources and preparing annotated bibliographies. Then finally, number three, critical pedagogy interrogates systems and structures of inequity. And this can be a lot, in person or virtually in a one-shot. I really appreciate Mara Seal's chapter in the Critical Pedagogy Handbook. She talks about having critical discussions within the normal course of a one-shot session. So for example, this was a first-year seminar on protest songs. Students were looking for sources for a final research paper. So we did activities based around searching for sources. At the end of the session, I asked, why might some songs, artists, cultures be missing from databases and collections? There was a pause, and a student chimed in on the mic and said, oh, that's a good question, and had some thoughts, and then other students chimed in, which made it a really nice discussion. And also there's an upcoming graduate class I'm teaching. They're focused on algorithms of oppression and equity for one of their modules. And so preparing some questions, one of which we'll discuss what might be helpful and or problematic about the way information is organized and labeled. So these are just some simple ideas. Again, advance a collaborative learning community, center experience, emotion, and reflection, and interrogate systems of inequity. Feel free to reach out. There's my email. Thank you so much. I have my bibliography and my slides and some learning resources, teaching resources available through the link, tinyurl.com/ACRL 2021 Durham. And thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Josh Becker, and I'm pleased to discuss an information ethics course that I designed this spring and will teach in the fall of 2021. During this presentation, please pause each slide if you'd like to read more. At its core, information ethics examines how information is used and abused through human communication. My course is going to focus around online communication. Although there is some overlap with information literacy, information ethics is primarily concerned with how individuals and groups disseminate and censor various kinds of information in ways that may benefit or harm society. At the same time, there are two ACRL frames: information creation as a process and information as value, that reflect some of the most important issues in information ethics. Information can be manipulated by individuals for many different purposes. As librarians, we want students to create and utilize information in a socially responsible way. This will help support lifelong learning. When creating an information ethics course, remember that the topic is very vast. So talk to faculty in many academic departments, as well as colleagues. And research course LibGuides and syllabi from many different institutions. Don't try to be comprehensive in your approach. Consider the main themes of your course and reflect on the central question that is driving these themes. My course is titled Information Ethics, Big Data, Privacy, Social Media, and Fake News. It's a 200-level elective, and it's open to all undergraduates without prerequisites. Course themes will be taught initially through case studies. Major ethical theories will be explored, and students will examine codes of ethics from a range of national and international organizations. The major topics are listed here. As you can see, this is a broad list, but that attests to how rich information ethics can be. Arguably, the most important topic is misinformation. Think about how misinformation has affected America's elections, responses to COVID-19, public opinion on climate change, as well as many other issues. Another key topic is the digital divide, which has been shown to widen our achievement gap, lead to reduced employment opportunities, and create greater income inequality. Recent research has revealed that through algorithmic biases, the internet is not neutral. These biases lead to harmful effects by perpetuating stereotypes and widening differences. Big data is another topic. How much freedom should corporations have over personal information? One of the best ways to get students to think about these very different topics is through the use of case studies. Students will be given real-world scenarios and try to come up with solutions to these problems in groups. They'll exercise critical thinking skills, they'll use inductive reasoning, they'll cope with ethical ambiguities, and they'll analyze complex situations. Are social media companies responsible for our fake news? How does a lack of privacy affect our society? Should businesses be allowed to regulate an employee's social media habits outside of work? Students will have opinions on all of these questions, so they're a great way to introduce the field of information ethics. At the same time, many students are limited in their ability to conduct their own research. So reinforcing the importance of strategic searching as well as evaluating information can be very helpful to students as they conduct their own research independently. Throughout the fall, I'm going to practice continuous assessment to determine what's working and what's not. That way, when I teach the class again in the spring, I'll have made useful modifications that should improve the student experience. Ultimately, information ethics is a very broad, interdisciplinary field that affects us all. Consider creating an information ethics course of your own. Thanks, and enjoy ACRL.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christine Fena, and thank you for tuning into my talk, Citation as Empowerment, Motivating Undergraduates to Value Their Source Lists. So this talk asks the question, when students are learning how to use academic systems of citation, how might we as librarians motivate them to engage with the practice of citation in ways that feel meaningful to them? Here's just a few quotes from Allison Hudd's 2013 Project Information Literacy Report. Not surprisingly, students said that citation was tedious and confusing, and that they were often too intimidated or embarrassed to ask for help. And I'm sure that many of you are also familiar with the sentiments that citation feels irrelevant, pedantic, very challenging in terms of time management, and citation is really just something you have to do to avoid plagiarism. Now, at first glance, the relationship between citation and plagiarism makes perfect sense. Fear is an excellent motivator, and you can see these two concepts being presented together over and over again in the resources that we create for our students. But the pairing also presents some challenges, which we might consider with the help of theories of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, constructivism, cultures of assessment and compliance, and critical pedagogy. It might also be helpful to consider the ways information literacy instruction has been moving away from prescriptive and self-contained skill sets, focusing instead on contextualization. Further, we might want to examine discussions about academic integrity that question the wisdom of positioning the student against the university, and the extent to which we could be reinforcing a terrifying rather than satisfying learning experience. Clearly, there's a lot of big questions outside the scope of this talk. So I want to share some simple ideas about how I've been trying to navigate this problem within the limited time and space I share with students in workshops and one-off instruction sessions. We already have some pretty consistent stock reasons we give students for citing their sources. Just as examples and as a refresher, I'll share a few slides I've made that include some fairly standard reasoning we offer to students. These are 4 slides with reasons such as attribution, authority and credibility, replicability, and yes, there it is, the academic dishonesty piece. A 5th slide I include, just to change the tone a bit, focuses on the source list as a way to really celebrate the student's unique research journey. So when looking at these reasons we commonly give students for citing sources, I find that students are most familiar with the give credit where credit is due concept and the avoid plagiarism concept. And these are, of course, very important pieces. But if the students do get confused and think the attribution is to simply show reverence or please their professor, what does this do to their own sense of agency in the research process? Citation becomes prescriptive. Opportunities for metacognition are reduced, and the student might feel very small. I'm not sure that's the best way to motivate Generation Z. So I've been experimenting with placing a bit more emphasis on the other 3 areas, which make it easier to frame citation as an act of empowerment. The source list can become a way for students to recognize their own agency and uniqueness, to empower the authors they chose and the diverse perspectives they have worked hard to include, and empower their readers to follow up and learn more about the topic. We've seen that Gen Z values community engagement. Framing citations so that it's a little bit less about avoiding accusations and more about proactively participating in knowledge creation might help balance out some of the more tedious and pedantic elements of citation. I'll conclude with a quote from Toni Morrison in which she frames the role of language as not only a system of communication, but also a living thing over which we all have control, and really as a representative of agency itself. Thank you for listening, and please feel free to contact me at my email address with questions, comments, or ideas.
Hi, and thank you for joining our presentation. My name is Emily Alford, and together, Meredith, Knoff, and I are going to speak on viewing the academic library at Indiana University as a place for voter engagement initiatives. IU's efforts are part of a nationwide challenge through which Big Ten academic alliance schools engage in a friendly competition to see which campus rises above the rest in two areas: greatest voter turnout and largest improvement in voter turnout.
When we started planning for 2020, we identified 3 areas for which we wanted to create content: resources, programming, and services. We also wanted to focus on evaluative skills to encourage students to become more active in civic life. We wanted to do more than help students register to vote and locate their polling places. We explored what we could do to help address misinformation around election issues and political candidates, and decided to bring this discussion to voter registration by creating voter literacy consultations. We included these service consultations into a pre-existing service, the Learning Commons Research Desk, with which students were already familiar. Beginning in August and running through Election Day, students could use the online research desk for help on any Election Day topic. We also created a programming series that we called Democracy Gatherings to act as a forum to discuss topics and skills related to civic and voter literacy. We invited guest speakers that not only educated students, but also encouraged them to consider perspectives different from their own. We partnered with representatives from the campus and local community. These included the president of the League of Women Voters of Bloomington-Monroe County, a representative from the BLM Bloomington Core Council, faculty members from IU departments, IU graduate students to act as moderators for panels, and Emily led a voter literacy workshop with the help of 2 graduate students. We worked to partner with many campus communication channels. The biggest was the campus Political and Civic Engagement Office. We also partnered with subject librarians working closely with disciplines related to civic engagement topics, as well as other courses, campus social media channels, and the main campus event calendar.
Using LibGuides, we created a comprehensive resource for students to turn to for all of their 2020 election needs. This, of course, included a voter registration section, as well as unbiased, reliable candidate information. There's a page dedicated to voting literacy itself, with definitions of common voting and election terms, as well as voting and election laws. We included some general democracy and civic engagement resources, federal, state, and local government links. We even embedded democracy-themed playlists created by several of our colleagues right onto the guide. After receiving nearly 800 LibGuide views, we have learned that students at Indiana University truly value having access to reliable voting literacy information.
We held 2 training sessions to prepare research assistants for voter literacy consultations. One focused on voter registration procedures, including help for both residents and out of state. The second looked at locating ballot and candidate information and determining bias in sources. Voting literacy topics included how to create a voting action plan, researching ballot initiatives, researching candidate information, including voting records and positions, and using evaluative techniques like the CRAP method to identify bias. Our voter literacy consultations focused on critical thinking skills that pulled from information literacy habits. We wanted to help students understand the same kinds of questions they asked about sources they used for coursework applied to information they used in their daily lives. Questions we encourage students to consider include: what's the difference between a newspaper reporter and someone working for a campaign? Why should I use multiple sources to fully understand a candidate's position? And why is it sometimes more expensive to access newspaper coverage compared to campaign information?
To encourage lasting student engagement, we have created a democracy toolkit and are currently developing a civic engagement event series to take place this year. In advance of upcoming elections, we hope to be able to continue our previous efforts, as well as add in some others where folks can gather together physically and engage in conversation around democracy and voting literacy.
Thank you for attending our session where we shared our strategies for bringing civic and voter literacy to the academic library. If you have any questions, you can contact Emily, the head of Government Information, Maps, and Microform Services, or myself, the Learning Commons librarian, at either of our emails.
Hello, everyone. We are Jill Chisnell and Teresa Macgregor from Carnegie Mellon University, here to present You Only Get One Shot to Make a First Impression. We've all experienced the traditional show and tell lecture on library resources. It's formal, one expert on stage pointing and clicking, and passive, students watch, they don't do. These sessions are terribly boring, and when our brains are not engaged, we are not learning. This is especially true for our current undergraduates from Generation Z. Studies confirm that these students prefer active learning with plenty of hands-on activities. They like to learn by trial and error, with instructors as facilitators, not lecturers. So we need to design instruction with this audience in mind. A useful theoretical framework is the ARCS model of motivational design developed by educational psychologist John Keller. The acronym stands for Attention, Relevance, Confidence, and Satisfaction. By aligning instructional methods with the ARCS model, we can design lessons that motivate our students to learn. Lessons should be novel, even surprising. They should pose challenging questions or tasks. And our teaching methods should vary to support different learning styles. At our library, we tried several different approaches to teaching databases, from think, pair, share to flipped classrooms to let's make a deal game shows. The more successful activities corresponded to the ARCS model, but nothing really stuck. So we looked outside the library for inspiration. First, we thought of speed dating. At these popular events, singles come together for 10-minute dates, then move on to the next date at a given signal. It's a fun and low-stakes way to meet a lot of people in a short amount of time. Related is the concept of Lonely Hearts ads, the print version of finding a match. Surprisingly, these have been around since the 17th century and spiked in popularity with the internet. Even if you are not in the market for a partner, the ads are always fun to read. By combining these two ideas, we created speed databasing. The activity has the fast pace and movement of speed dating with clever and informative Lonely Hearts ads to match students with research databases at the library. So how do you do it? First, select a variety of databases and write Lonely Hearts ads for each one. As you can see from this ad for Frost & Sullivan, it is accurate, informative, and amusing. My ideal dinner guests, the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Here's one for Bridgman Education. Physical description, over 1.2 million images. You'd be surprised to know all my images have been copyright cleared. In search of someone to add to the slideshow of my life. Accurate, informative, and clever. Next, create a mood. Sprinkle rose petals, lower the lights, and play romantic music. When students enter the room and see rose petals, they are definitely paying attention. At the start of the class, explain the activity to students. Post instructions at the front of the room so they don't get lost in the logistics. Give them a handout to make it easy to take notes. Provide sample questions for them to answer as they explore each database. Start the exercise by ringing a bell. An actual bell works wonders. Students have 5 minutes to read the ad, search in the database, and take notes. Ring the bell again for the students to wrap up and move to the next database. Repeat until the session ends. To assess the activity, collect students' notes. You can see some examples here, or assign homework. We asked students to create an original Lonely Hearts ad for a database, and the results were terrific. The students' ads were on point and clever. Our favorite ad was for Access Science. It's informative, 3,000 biographies and 18,000 images, and funny. Religion? Nope. Database of science. Students enjoyed the assignment and learned a lot about a new database. Depending on your context, use a different name for the activity. At the Qatar campus, not a single student had heard of speed dating, but they all understood matchmaking. Also, this activity isn't just for students. We've run it for instructors and library staff, all with great results. And everyone loves the Lonely Hearts ads. Even if you can't run the full activity, use the ads to spur interest in your databases. LibGuides, bookmarks, and digital signage. We hung poster-sized versions at our library, and they get lots of attention. If you want to try speed databasing, check out our community of practice on the Open Science Framework. The site includes instructions, templates, sample Lonely Hearts ads, plus our custom-designed logo. Feel free to reuse and share anything on the site. Thank you for your attention. We hope you try speed databasing to help students fall in love with research at your library. If you do try it, send an email to let us know how it goes. We love hearing about new twists and happy endings. And of course, share your materials with the community of practice.